Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. It's Hail Yes, the Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Freep, joined on this sunny Wednesday morning by our Big Ten insider, Reiner Saban. Reiner, how are you? Enjoying the sun? Are you going out later today? Your view does not appear to be super sunny, I must say.
Yes, it's kind of dark right now, but the little obscured, I would also say, but away from the loud noises outside my door.
I was going to say, this is not your normal recording spot. When we started a few minutes ago, it sounded like Tom and Jerry was playing in the background, but that's not what it was.
No, it was not. So, but no, it did kind of sound rather cartoonish on the outside, and it was a little bit distracting. So I had to shift locations, move to the other side of the apartment.
You're always making things work for us, and well, it sounds like there was just some workers outside. They're allowed to do that, so that's fine. It's a nice sunny day, as we were saying. That's why they're outside. Andrew, you're playing some G later. Over under 91.5.
Oh, hammer the under. I've been playing some good golf this year. I'm not going to lie. I normally am a wreck off the tee, but I've been playing some pretty good golf this year, so I can't complain.
Okay. So what, I didn't really know what, because somehow, we're friends, not just in the office. I guess maybe not, but we like to think we're friends, not just in the office. Yet we've never golfed together still.
I know. I think the seasons have overlapped awkwardly, and we just ended up not playing together. But yeah, I've been shooting like right around 79, 80, 81, and then like 84, somewhere in that range. So on a bad day. But this is not normal for me. So I've been playing some good golf, like I said. Hopefully it continues today. Now I'm going to shoot like freaking 100 today. Watch.
Yeah, 92 exactly, and you'll be like, "Wow, how did Vegas know? Vegas always knows." All right, so here's the plan. We met with. We're going to do this in two parts, as we tend to do. We met with the new Michigan basketball staff yesterday for the first time. Head coach Justy May, and then assistants Kyle Church, Drew Williamson, Justin Joyner, and Akeem Miskadeen. The only assistant not there was Mike Boynton Jr. The team's essentially complete, Reiner, and we got some really good insight from Dusty, I thought, into sort of the process of it, what they did, their vision on how they want to play, just a lot of good stuff. So we will get into all of that, then go into break. Then coming out of it, I got to sit down with Warde Manuel a couple times the past few weeks for a one-on-one. That came out in 3 parts on freep.com last Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. So the boys are going to ask me a bit about sort of the behind the scenes of that. Does that all sound correct, Reiner?
That sounds like a good plan there, Tony.
Excellent. I would say I came up with it all by myself, but the three of us just discussed it. So that's how we all know what we're doing. All righty. So 30,000 foot view, Reiner. I feel takeaway number one from yesterday for me. This program already feels like it has a direction that the previous regime did not, at least in the few years where I was around firsthand to observe it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they have a defined style of play, very modern basketball. Dusty May said that from the outset at his first press conference. And then he assembled a roster that seems to execute his vision and carry it out the way that he sees it, where they're going to have guys that can produce in the post, take high percentage shots, also shooters on the outside that can take high volume amount of outside shooting and knock them down, and then also be able to create spacing, do ball screening, run the kind of motion that he wants, and again, play with tempo and pace. So I think again, they were very strategic in how they assembled this roster, taking players from programs big and small, but all of them seem to have a skill set that kind of fits what they want. And again, it was very well thought out and planned, and that seems to be Dusty May's MO.
It's amazing how we haven't seen these guys play 1 second on the court together. And it goes without saying, it will be better than last year. Because last year was, of course, the worst year in Michigan basketball history. But you can just already sort of see the vision, right? You understand how the pieces come together. So everybody, I guess let's start with sort of, I guess, the orbit, what this team I think will orbit around, which is going to be Vlad Golden, the 7'1" center from FAU who Dusty brought along. Now, people were uncertain if Dusty would be able to bring him up to Ann Arbor from Boca Raton because one of his first commits from the transfer portal was 7-footer Danny Wolf from Yale, right? Who was sort of a stretch 5 there. But May, I mean, gave them both. I mean, he pitched himself. I imagine he would have been telling Danny, this question was not asked specifically, but he would have been telling Danny, look, we anticipate Vlad's going to come here, so you are going to play some 5 and some 4 for us, right? He was talking about transparency and honesty. That's why they went 8 for 8 on their primary targets when assembling this roster, which is why it looks so good so quickly. We can get into that a bit more down the line. But when you have Vlad Golden, who's 15 and 10, and just a classic 5, who it's like protect the paint, and then we're going to dump it to you down low, and we're going to play through you a little bit down there. Or you can have an entirely different look if he's on the bench, and you can have Wolf really stretching the floor. Or option 3, put one at the 5, one at the 4. You have 17 feet of defense in 17 and a half feet of wingspan or whatever in just a couple players. And so just that sort of buy-in. And then you talk about all the motion that they want to run. Another thing, I mean, Trey
Donaldson.
Why was I about to say Williamson? I was like, it's not Williamson. Trey Donaldson, 6'2", Auburn, a lot of new faces, a lot of new names. Forgive that brain fart. Trey Donaldson from Auburn is really kind of the only true point guard with experience on this team. I mean, a lot of the other pieces are 2s and 3s and 4s and shooters, but Dusty said, like, this is not. And that's another part of, I think, maybe what's enticing and intriguing about this offense. There's not just one guy you have to get the ball to, like a Doug McDaniel, let's say, and say, like, all right, like let's make this thing go. Get the offense set, right? Everyone can get the offense set. Sometimes you're running motion through on the outside. Sometimes you're dumping it down low, Rainer.
Yeah, that's the concept of positionless basketball, which again is more popular now than obviously before, and where players can play multiple spots at any time. Basically, there's a lot more freedom. It's concept based. They're not running specific plays. Everything's kind of fluid and in the somewhat improvisational. I mean, it gives the players a lot of freedom, which is what's appealing about the system. I think, that's how Dusty May was able to kind of recruit these guys, is because it's a free-flowing system. And then you can point to the advanced metrics. I mean, last couple of years, FAU was in the top 30 in adjusted offensive efficiency and effective field goal percentage. I mean, they're taking smart shots and they're being obviously very efficient in how they run their offense. And so, again, somebody who's running an attractive offense is going to be able to recruit high value players. And so I think that was part of the sales pitch that Dusty May was able to kind of effectively get across.
And then perhaps the most remarkable part of it, if not just the fit and how it all came together, Reiner, we started talking about this briefly, is how they were 8 for 8. And we're not trying to pile on the previous regime, right? There's nothing personal. Good luck to Juwan. Hopefully everything works out with the Nets. He's done. He had a lot of winning seasons. There were a lot of good times with Juwan Howard as a coach and a player. All those things have happened. Aside from that, it was a complete dumpster fire at the end, right? It was a total train wreck, and that went all the way down to the handling of the transfer portal and the recruiting, right? I mean, in 2021, they had the top recruiting class in the nation, and by a few years later, you have 3 guys in the span of 2 years who are trying to commit that have to either ask out of their national letter of intent or are transferring in Caleb Love and Terrence Shannon, and cannot get in, be it for academic reasons, yet you still let the word get out that they were coming, which throws everything else into whack. Not to mention, how much time were you spending prioritizing them, right? Like I've been told by previous people related to the team that like, hey, look, these things move quickly. And if you find out that Caleb Love is interested in you, you say yes now and you ask questions later. I mean, I guess that's all well and good, but it doesn't sound like it was a very great strategy, right? I mean, clearly. Yeah. And now compare that to what Dusty said, right? They knew they had this was in 42 days. Dusty May came, and in 42 days, he was alone. He had nobody but his wife and his 3 sons with him. He hired multiple people from FAU. He hired a former Power 5 head coach. He's hired someone who's been like an associate out at St. Mary's. I mean, guys with reaches for all across the globe. He said it specifically. He's like, I didn't hire my boys. I hired people who do things that I don't do, and who are gonna. Sounds a lot like a former football coach who was around here, right? I mean, just put the puzzle together, fit the pieces. But also, like a former football coach, it's guys you had ties to, guys you know, right? It's that combination of both. And I mean, maybe it's because it's hard to overstate how far the wheels had fallen off. I mean, there were not even wheels around. You were just riding on axles in the last few years, and now it looks so put together so quickly.
Well, I mean, again, and Dusty May. This is the product of what being a head coach somewhere before, having the experience of running a program.
Great point.
At the college level, having to do this. I mean, Juwan Howard didn't have any of that experience. He was hired off a bench, in the NBA to be the head coach of a major program. I mean, it was a risky hire, at the outset, and it was a huge departure from what they previously had with John Beilein. And so, in a lot of ways, and again, he was able to kind of piggyback off that success for a couple of years, but eventually the program, fell apart because. Again, his recruiting strategy was odd. I mean, again, it was more focused on like high level talent. I mean, who knows if, Terrence Shannon and Caleb Love would have really fit. I mean, just because you have really good players doesn't mean they necessarily fit. And that's the difference with, I think, Dusty May. He's not shooting for stars necessarily. He's trying to get guys that, fit what he needs to do, how it's all going to work. And how they're all going to function interchangeably within the system. And so I think that was his priority, not trying to recruit, 5-star. I mean, the other thing is I will push back a little bit on the 8 for 8. I think they would have liked to have Janelle Davis if they could. The fact that he went to Arkansas, and Calipari wanted him, and he was arguably the top transfer portal player in the country, and he played at FAU for Dusty May. I think he probably would have.
Sorry for cutting you off, Reiner. I think he would have fallen exactly in that wrong gray area because he's not. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's a grad student, but he's played for 3-4 years. Right, like he's still undergraduate status. Like I don't think they could have gotten him.
But you're the target when you're saying
right. But that's another thing Dusty said. They said we had to prioritize guys. They're like sure that he said as much. You're totally right. I'm sure he's exactly who they were referring to. He's like, are there other guys we probably would have liked to look at and kick the can down the road? Sure, but we thought there was too much gray area, and we didn't have time for gray area. And so we had to pass. And I mean, maybe this will sound really silly months down the road, but it just looks like they put together such a cohesive roster.
Well, based on what they could, target and conceivably get, they did as good as they could possibly do. I think, based on what their strategy was. I mean, as far as getting guys to fit his specific system, and so he had to work within the parameters of what he was allowed to pursue. And so I think he did well in that regard. I mean, I think, again, if he probably had, a true target list, though, I mean, obviously Davis and, maybe some other players would have been on that list. But, obviously there's some restrictions. you have at Michigan when it comes to the transfer portal.
It's true. I want to talk just a little bit more about sort of some of the other players we didn't touch on. We know guys like Will Cheddar, Namari Burnett, Jace Howard. One of the things that came out of yesterday is Kyle Church said that Jace Howard is expected to return. So that's why when, by my math, they had 2 scholarships left, and Dusty had said they had 1, and I just didn't know who 12 was. So I think that secret is now out of the bag. Seems like Jace Howard is number 12. And another point, which I think was sort of the crux of your story today in Freep.com, is about how maybe Michigan, while nobody loves the transfer portal, right, and the state of college athletics, Dusty May and Michigan would not have been the opportunity to turn this roster over in this way, this quickly, this cohesively a few years ago, right? And maybe this is really opening the conversation too much, but that's also even part like NIL, right? Like not just the transfer portal and the unlimited transferring and all the things. There has to be a real alignment within the program. And I just don't think, one, college sports, but 2, Michigan would have been in this position to be able to do this a few years ago.
Yeah, no, I think, it allows for a coaching change, natural attrition to occur with coaching changes. I think it benefited in Dusty May in a weird way to see 3 of their primary starters leave. Terrace Reed, Terrence Williams, and Doug McDaniel in some ways, because, he didn't have to fit them into his system. He could basically say, thanks, I understand you're leaving. I'll go find guys that I'm familiar with and I think can actually adapt well to the system. And I can curate this roster the way I want to do right off the bat. And I think that was really important. And I think a lot of the guys, assistant coaches, Akeem Esteen, also agreed with that point. Kyle Church, the idea that, the college landscape has given new coaches a chance to just flip a roster and get the guys in right off the bat that they need to kind of boost the program. Rick Pitino did it at St. John's last year. You're seeing it at Arkansas with John Calipari, seeing it with Mark Pope at Kentucky. All across the board. When a new coach comes in, Eric Busselman at USC, they're bringing in their guys right off the bat and getting their program up and running.
Yeah, but it's funny that there is sort of a tipping point where it's too far and there's too many new, right? Like I think Dusty was talking about the transfer number 7 sort of being that sort of max sweet spot number.
Yeah, and I think that's more also related to year to year, like what Eric Musselman I saw, at Arkansas, what he did, where he, did it to the extreme, where he basically flipped the entire roster, and he couldn't put the pieces all together, and they, stunk last year, and so, which is part of the reason why he's now at USC. I think, he just couldn't figure it out, and just things kind of came to a head. And I think if you go too far into that, from after you've already come to a specific program, or you're 2 or 3 years in and you're still doing that, that's not a good sign. Right now, it's almost essential that you, and a necessity that you have to actually build your roster through the portal. And I think, Dusty may actually will benefit from that this year. But if it continues along those lines, I think that then you're running into problems. And I think that you've seen that across college basketball.
I think he'll definitely benefit from it because, like, you talk about how specific he can get. And, Dusty, when you've been around like he has and you have a system that you like to run, there are traits and types of guys that you like in certain positions, right? He's like, we wanted a tall point guard, a big, strong point guard who can also be sort of the head of the snake defensively, like who is a real physical defender. Trey Donaldson. He's like, we want shooters and spacers and length. Sam Walter, 6'10". Namari Burnett, 6'4", 6'5" at a 2. That's good size. I like guys who can get downhill. Roddy, and who offensive rebound. Roddy Gale is just a downhill attack the basket guy. I mean, just he even said it with Will Cheddar. He said what every Michigan fan has thought for a year and a half. He's like, I haven't really crunched the numbers, but Michigan just looked better when he was on the court. That's not a new thought, right? And so keeping him around. Even Jace Howard, he's not going to wow the world, but he is a leader. He and as a 11th man, 12th man, he's like an energy guy off the bench for 5 minutes. I don't think he's going to mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but he is a good young man. He's going to be a captain. Mark my words. And just it's a good thing. I think he knew what he was doing. Like, he wasn't going to keep him around as like, he wasn't going to force anyone else's spot. But when he saw at the end of the bench that there's room for him too. So there's just a ton of cohesion. As I see it right now, up and down this roster, from the sizes, the shooters, the dribblers, the size, the year in school, the eligibility remaining. There's a foundation to build on, and that feels really rare when everything the last 3 years has been year after year, turnover in this program, right? New point guard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, they're going to have a new point guard this year, but I mean, again, it's somebody that, again, is handpicked by the head coach. And so he doesn't have to try to convince Doug McDaniel to run the system this way. I mean, that's the benefit of the transfer. One of the rare benefits of the transfer portal, where the attrition actually probably helped Michigan in this instance and allowed Dusty May to kind of put his imprint on the program quicker than he would have in the old system, where he would have had to work around the talent that was already on the roster.
Yeah, and that, my friends, is how in 6 to 8 weeks you go from, feeling really not good about your program to certainly, I think it's fair to say there are NCAA tournament expectations for this team. I mean, Kyle Church said as much yesterday, right? And so not a bad place to be from where you were.
Yeah. I mean, they've got players that have been in the NCAA tournament, that they brought in and, just last year. And so, I mean, like, what's to say that they can't do that at Michigan, especially when, you put the collection of talent together that Dusty May thinks can run a system well, and his system has proven to be effective. So, it seems like they have a decent shot now of doing that. So the program already appears to be in better shape than it would have been if they just kind of continued and hoped for the best with following this the disastrous final year of Juwan Howard's tenure.
Agreed. I mean, you shudder to think what another year would have looked like. Truly, it had gotten that bad. So things are on the up and up at Michigan basketball. All right, time for a quick break. On the other side, a little bit of talk about our conversation with Warde Manuel. That's next. This is Hail Yes. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to switch up the dynamic just a little bit for this portion of the show. Good news for you. I was going to say good news. You'll hear less of me, but that's probably not the case. I'm going to be answering questions instead of driving the show. Who knows? So more Andrew Reiner. We'll sort of three-man this. Andrew, that was a horrible toss to you. So the ball is yours.
I guess I'll take it from here. Anyways, basically, yeah. So this is kind of Reiner and I's idea. We want to throw it at Tony and ask him questions about his process for that Warde Manuel story, because I think people have a general awareness that it's kind of unusual to get a sit-down interview like that, but the circumstances around getting that story were interesting in and of itself. So we wanted to ask Tony about it, and just kind of his experience. So I guess the first question, if someone was reading that, their question would be like, how did you get Warde Manuel to sit down with you? As much as you're comfortable telling us.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of right place, right time, and then a little bit of relationship building, right? I've known Warde for a couple of years now, and just gotten to speak to him a little, I mean, certainly more late. I mean, not talking about this interview, but a little bit more lately. I mean, I know Reiner has mentioned in the past, and we've had discussions about it. It's true how Ward has seemed to be just more approachable, I guess, since the calendar of 2024, right? We talked to him after Sharon was hired, after Dusty was hired, and at the national championship. And that's 3 times. I don't think we had 3 conversations with him in the 18 months before where I was around. So it's just, so that was different inherently. And because of that, I just felt that I knew him a little more, right? I mean, before I never would have even had the situation or the opportunity to approach him. He wouldn't know me like that, and we wouldn't have any rapport to do that. But just when, I mean, it was senior day senior day basketball. Michigan was playing Nebraska, I think, and I was just walking sort of in the bowels of Chrysler Center, and we crossed paths, and he just shakes hand. Hey, hi, how you doing? And I mean, we had a conversation, and that was definitely one of my best conversations with him. I mean, maybe normally before it's been 30 seconds at a time, if that, just a couple glad handing. We were talking like 10, 15 minutes. And it was during that conversation. I mean, that was just sort of off the record, us just going back and forth. But it was during that conversation where I asked him, I was like, hey, I cover football and basketball. There's been a ton of questions I've loved to ask you for all these years, but there hasn't been a proper time to do it. And I mean, I guess it's the definition to shooting your shot. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Like, I'll get back to you later this spring. And I want to give a ton of credit to him, to Ward, for doing so, because he did not. I mean, you can make all the arguments. He should be more transparent and all those things in general. But I just mean for this, he did not have to agree to that. He did not have to say yes. And he did not have to reach back out the way he did. Kurt Svoboda, the associate athletic director, sent me a text message about 4 weeks later saying, hey, I was in a meeting with Ward today, and he told me how he had told you that you could come in for a sit down, and we just wanted to sort of try to get that on the books. And so I thought that was really cool of him. And I know you'll have more questions. I just want to make sure to get to this too. Another just sort of credit to Ward. We agreed to a 30-minute sit down the first time. And there was a ton of questions that we had to get to, and that I felt I wanted to get to. And about 28 minutes in, it was clear we weren't going to get to all of them. And as we wrapped, he agreed to do it again the next week. He's like, look, I don't know when you're publishing this, but I'm happy to answer the rest of your questions. I mean, he was leaving town the next day, and he was going to be flying to a couple places in the next 4 days. And we worked it out and then did it again. So just right place, right time. Know him a bit, certainly know him more now, but I guess that's sort of how the sausage was made.
Reiner, from your perspective, I mean, you're able to maybe insert your opinion a little bit more as a columnist, and you've kind of talked over the years about how the Michigan athletic department in general just is not super open discussion and will, and dialogue, if you will. Do you think this represented a change in tone or a change in tenor, or do you think this is kind of just, hey, I'm going to pay good on a commitment I made?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, I think I don't know if this is going to lead to more openness. I mean, we haven't seen it from Sharon Moore up until yesterday. We really haven't seen it from Dusty May either. I mean, whether the basketball program, but there is hope that, maybe with Dusty May that things will be better than they were specifically under Juwan Howard as far as openness. I think in general, the program is they put a wall around Michigan athletics, and Ward has been a big part of that over the years doing that. And I think that goes back to even Bo Schembechler. I mean, again, Schembechler had a very, somewhat of a disdain for the media in general. I mean, there was a Sports Illustrated story, I think it came out in like 1981, where he kind of lays out the reason why, I guess, he has that. And you saw that with Jim Harbaugh and how he approached the media. Didn't see much value in dealing with them. Of course, sometimes he would get stuff through the back channels of how he would use the media to get his message out, sometimes against Ward himself. But I mean, again, that all of this kind of probably goes back to Schembechler, because again, Schembechler influenced Warde Manuel, Schembechler influenced, Jim Harbaugh. And so, I mean, do I think it's going to suddenly change where there's going to be like a glasnost, which is, an openness, I guess, to use a Russian term from the Gorbachev era. But no, I don't think so. I don't think that there's going to be that. But I do think Ward recognizes that his college football playoff chairmanship, he's going to have to answer questions and hard questions. And maybe he's trying to prep for that by sitting down with like Tony, who's going to ask tough questions. And he did. I mean, the question I had for Tony is like, did you get the sense that he was feeling defensive in the interview at times? Because you did ask some pretty probing questions.
A little bit, but not really. I would say if I had to say yes or no, I would definitely say no. I felt he was not particularly defensive. I felt, how questions can read and sound different, right? Like the audio can really give a different tone. I thought it didn't read quite as genuine as it sounded to me. Like I thought Ward was pretty fair. I didn't, but I did not like all of his answers, and that's when I tried to do my best to give some pushback. But I didn't feel he was particularly defensive. The only thing, he said it, and it was included in one of the parts of the story. The only thing he said he didn't like was anything that was being insinuated about Xavier Simpson and his wife and anything like that. And I said, I wasn't insinuating anything. It was just a question I had not heard an answer to. And like anyone, I think like I can certainly say myself, it's one thing to answer questions about how I'm doing my job. As soon as my family gets brought in, my tenor is going to change. That's human nature. And so, I was very I tried to be specific with even the wording of my questions. Like when I said why it was registered to your family name, right? We all know who it was specifically registered to, but it doesn't need to say why was your wife's car, right? And so I tried to make it where he wasn't on the defensive. And we had, I don't know how much better it could have gone other than him. Like, I don't mean for me, I don't know what more I could have expected other than him like giving me like the keys to the building, right? You know what I mean?
There's only so much he can say, right? Like he's not going to like shoot himself in the foot. You know what I mean? I guess it went as well as he could have gone without shooting himself in the foot, really. You know what I mean?
Right. What's he going to say? I'm a horrible, corrupt leader. You're absolutely right. I was trying to hide the fact that Mel Pearson had a scummy program. And yes, we paid for Xavier Simpson's car. Like that was it. No, now those things are not true. I want to be clear. None of those things are true.
We don't know that they're true or not true.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure, but based on what he said, it's not true, but we don't know for sure if that's what happened. But he also wasn't, even if it was true.
I'll go back to your right, and I'll go back to your point. There's things he can say and can't say. We'll leave it at that, right? Like there are things he cannot say. There are things he chooses not to say, and there's things that maybe he shares with other people. And here's what my sense. This was the sense I took away when I came away from Ward. He is comfortable handling things the way he has and the way he does. He feels, right, wrong, or indifferent, he feels that the people who need to know. Anything that needs to be known, the people who need to know it. And beyond that, he doesn't need to. Talk can be talk. It can all float in the ether. Anyone can say anything, and they can all he can take the body blows. That is the tenor. Now, I don't think that's the right way to handle it, but I think that's what he's done, and I think he feels fine doing so.
I think sticking on that topic, like something that stuck out was, if Ward did give you a non-answer that you didn't like, you would sometimes press him on it, or say, oh well, I don't know if that's really that's not really what I'm saying, or like kind of press it a little bit. Oh well, you didn't kind of answer that. Was that like, what was that like in person? Was that where you kind of saw the pushback? Because I feel like you did there was definitely a concerted effort on your part to continue pushing if there wasn't an answer, kind of, right?
Here was my thought process. Nobody, we all know, as we sort of started this off, Ward doesn't really do this. And I'm seeing this as my one shot, right? What have I always wanted to know? This is not the time to ask about, I need to be kind. I need to be respectful. And I need to know that he has things and points and thoughts that he wants to get across. And there's a way to get to that. But the reason I'm here is to get the questions asked that I have not heard answers to. This is not about you. This is not about me. This is just, what are the answers to these questions? There's always a reason why we don't have the time to do it. And if I felt that he was just walking, if in my opinion, it was just my opinion, if I felt he was not answering your question satisfactorily, not that I didn't like the answer, but that it was a non-answer, that's when I felt that I needed to push a little more. Like, really, the one was when I was like, when you hear these things, like, what do you think? I was like, because it's kind of a lot. And he's like, well, I think it's 5. Right. Okay. Well, I guess you can get into arbitrary, like, what is or is not a lot. I would say that 5 incidents is a lot in one program in 16 months. That's just my opinion. But then I was like, but this isn't, I'm not just talking about football. I said, respectfully, there's basketball, there's hockey. I didn't even get into others. Why the volleyball coach was of a 25-year tenure. There just wasn't time. Right there, but there's a lot of questions, and that was the picture I was trying to paint, and that's why I said the word. Can you see why some people see it as systemic? And so, I did not. It was in my mind. I was trying to walk a fine line of, in no way being rude in any way, shape, or form, or just going there to dig up dirt or to be like some scroungy, dirty journalist, like none of that. But I needed answers to questions that I have not heard. And I wanted people who read this to say, he knows what he's doing. He went in there and he just asked the right questions. It's not my job to give the answers. I can't give the answers. I can only ask the questions that I feel need to be asked. And I don't know if I still, there's a couple questions I wished I had asked, maybe still, but it's all live. He's a person. I'm a person. It's going pretty quick. And you're just kind of doing the best you can.
Do you think Ward benefited from this? Because, honestly, I kind of came away not really satisfied with a lot of the answers like he gave. There was kind of like, you can't really control this aspect. And there is some truth to that with individuals. But, again, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, and, you're responsible for some of these people. You're the leader in charge. And then also, again, some of the stuff, it seems like he felt like, it was out of his control to some extent. Do you get the sense that you think he improved his image with the fan base, or even, skeptics and critics, or, how do you feel?
I don't know that he did. Just based on my inbox, right? There was some, sure, and that's not a great sample size, but I'm just saying people who were moved enough to reach out to say something, right? A lot of people were, more the same, this and that, but others said, kudos to Ward for answering the question, recognized, at least he sat down. Maybe this doesn't directly answer your question. It went a long way with me. And I know for maybe the rest of the planet, that means nothing. And I hope that's not the case, because I'm trying to explain why I think it should mean, if it meant something to me, I would think maybe it would mean something to some other people, ideally, because it's just the picture I painted at the beginning. He did not have to answer any of the questions. He did not have to agree to a sit down in anything, but he said something one day and then was a man of his word and went and did it. To me, that means something. I don't know how great his answers were. And here, I'll say that I was there for 1.5 hours, one of the days, right? This is not all on the record. There's things we talk about that he cannot say, right? There's things, and so, but I did not hold back on the record, right? We made sure he was very clear, and it's fun. And here's another thing, right? We had this big long when we had this conversation senior day. At the end of it, he's like we were talking about some pretty proprietary information, right? And he's like, and this is all off the record. And then continues. And I was like, well, just so you know, we need to agree in advance that something's off the record. You can't say something and then tell me it's off the record, right? right? Like, that's not how that works. I will honor that, but that's not how that works. And then he remembered that. And then this time he's like, before we get going, I just want to make sure I can say something off the record. I was like, absolutely. Like, for sure. And we had some long conversations. And so there's just, I'm not even trying. I hope this isn't coming across as like hoity-toity or something. There's things you can say and there's things you can't say. I thought he did his level best. He answered the questions. He didn't have to. I respect him more now than I did a few weeks ago. It's just, I do.
I think the biggest feather in his cap, inarguably, is that he sat down and set up the interview, right? That's where the win starts for Ward. You know what I mean? And now what he said in the interview, he was kind of, maybe not coy wouldn't be the right word, but certainly not detailed with some of his explanations. And that, that leaves you at probably wanting to have another sit down at some point in the future. But I think the fact that he did it would be where you're kind of saying, Tony, that you're giving him credit for. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And now I'm watching. You don't just get credit for showing up, right? I don't want to give too much credit. It's a fine line. But when you're operating from the baseline of he's never done anything and has no incentive to answer any questions, he did not just do it once. He did it twice. He answered I've never felt disrespected. I feel we have a better relationship now than we did before we went in. And I asked him the questions that I wanted the answers to. And guess what? I don't think anybody's ever, not ever, but like, I don't think there's a need to ask him about Xavier Simpson again. I have no need to ask him about Mel Pearson again. He gave me the answers that he's going to give. Now, if something changes or new info, now that's another story. And maybe I can talk to Xavier, maybe I can talk to the police. But Ward said his piece. He did his part. And now I don't need to ask the question. We've been talking about that for years. And so I think he deserves credit for that.
No, I agree. No, he deserves credit for it. But it speaks to the fact that he didn't nip these issues in the bud, when he could have, and allowed it to drag on to lead to this, kind of critical moment, I guess, where he's sitting down and having to answer all these questions. Because when you add them up, it looks pretty bad. I mean, like all the things you asked him about, in totality, that doesn't speak well to, some of the stuff that has gone on under his watch. There's been a lot of not so great things. We haven't even gotten into the Connor Stallions affair, which again speaks to some of the hiring practices that have happened, and how they got some of these people on board at Michigan in the first place. And so, there's been a lot of stuff that has happened, and he can't again monitor everything that goes on in the department, but when you add it all up, it doesn't paint a pretty picture necessarily.
Tony, back to my two-part thing here. So first of all, did you kind of lay ground rules as far as hey, just so you know, I'm going to hit you with some hard questions before the interview started? And secondly, what was the part that sitting there in the room, not reading it back, not reading your story, what was the part in the room where oh, I feel like this is this is it right here.
This is it. Oh, I'm glad this happened, or
this is the moment. What was the moment that stuck out to you, I guess?
When he circled back to talk about Xavier Simpson and his wife. That you could tell because that was later. It was, we were removed from that. We had moved on. And when he brought it up of his own accord, we were talking about other things, and we're talking about positive and negative, running out of time, this and that. He's like, oh no, I know you'll get to what you get to. He's like, only thing that didn't bother me, you could tell that it had been eating at him for a while. And not that I was trying to upset him, but that was just for someone, everyone, a lot of people, we read the interview, right? He was trying to be calculated. He was trying to be pretty level-headed. For someone who is a professional at staying level-headed to very clearly bring something up of their own accord, it was another level. He just couldn't help himself, right, on the record, right? There were things so I thought that was interesting. He seemed to talk pretty favorably about Jim. I don't know what incentive he still has to do that. Other than maybe he knows the fan base is still hanging on to Jim and likes Jim more than him, so he can't slander him. But I mean, so that was good. But I guess I should answer your first part. There weren't a ton of ground rules. I told them the vision that I went into this story with. Like, hey, here's my idea for this is that you're the second longest tenured AD since Don Canham. Of the modern era, yet you kind of operate in the shadows a bit. Like we hear from you like when necessary, but pretty much that's it. And there's some questions that we haven't asked. I mean, you're in a transition point in the athletics department. I mean, in 56 days, you got rid of the 2 money-making coaches. I mean, there's just the present, the past, the future. It felt like it all came together at this moment. And that was sort of just, I explained that as my vision.
That's a good clarification. Reiner, what do you think about the Harbaugh stuff? What do you think that's genuine? Do you think there's just no incentive to burn Harbaugh? Like, what is your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, he probably sees no. There's no upside to again, disparaging Harbaugh. I mean, especially given the fact that they did win the national championship. I mean, he ultimately accomplished a goal that he said, and again, Ward is taking credit for that, and because he, claims that obviously he was getting a lot of pushback when the program was 2-4 on the 2020 COVID season, and people were calling for his firing, and he decided to retain him. Now, Ward also leaves out the fact that he also slashed his pay in half, which kind of led to ultimately what. Harbaugh's flirtations with the NFL and his desire to kind of get back to the league, I think, when he kind of realized his relationship with his alma mater, Harbaugh's relationship with his alma mater was now just strictly business, I think. And it changed everything, that situation. But, in Ward's eyes, again, he did Harbaugh solid by keeping him and kind of giving him a second chance, another lifeline, and winning the championship. So I think in some ways he takes credit. And so there's, why would he necessarily want to disparage somebody that, again, he's taking credit for his, accomplishments in some ways by allowing him or giving him the opportunity to be able to kind of lead Michigan back to glory, so to speak. So, it doesn't really behoove him to do that. Also, I mean, again, no administrator really wants to do that because, again, there's a residual effect that, could have on other coaches and the chances to hire them going forward. I mean, this guy, talked badly about the previous coach he had. So why would I want to work for him? I mean, like, this guy doesn't seem like, he operates. I think Ward is being strategic and smart in that way, by not saying anything bad about Jim, even though there could have been opportunity to do that based on some of the stuff that Tom Mars is, his personal attorney as it relates to the NCAA case, has said about Michigan kind of through Twitter. I mean, where, Ward could have, fired back or done something like that. But he's taken the high road, and I think that's the right strategy here.
I think we should probably wrap things up here soon. But Tony, parting thoughts?
I think we got to a lot of it. Ward was, I made sure to get to my main takeaway at the beginning. Just was grateful that Ward was willing to do the sit down. Was pretty, more than pretty, quite pleased with just sort of the general reception that it got. Of course, you hope for perfect. You always hope for perfect. I wish we could have talked about the NCAA case and the sanctions and everything and how we found out and when he found out and what he knows. It's all under investigation, right? There's a lot of things that are still limited that he can't talk about. I would have loved maybe a little more just directness in general, but we know that's not his MO. I went in hoping to make sure I held him or that he was held accountable. I think he was for the most part, and I think the reception was pretty good. So I'm put a ball
outside of that, it's out of your hands, right?
Yeah, exactly. I did what I could. I did what I could, and I don't know beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was an informative discussion there about like kind of some of the inside baseball, if you will, some of the behind the scenes, and just kind of laying the groundwork there because, it's always interesting to see how these things come together. You see it in the paper, you see it on the website, but you don't see what kind of goes into it too. So, yeah, Tony, you want to send us off then?
I will. Thanks. I'm glad you guys, glad we talked about that. That was good stuff. So yes, thanks to both Andrew and Reiner, of course. Thanks to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, to our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford, and to our audio engineer, Robin Chan. Our executive editor, Anjanette Delgado, has moved on to bigger and better things. We miss you, Anjanette. I almost threw her name in just out of habit, and I guess I will one last time. So good luck, Anjanette, on the East Coast. Again, for Reiner, for Andrew, I'm Tony. One last little bit of housekeeping. I believe the plan is we're going to try to run this pod through as close on Wednesdays to Memorial Day as we can. June is off, barring breaking news that we must address, through the 4th of July. Once the holidays section of the summer has completed, we'll start ramping up for Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis. 3 days this year, 18 teams, 6, 6, and 6, and you guessed it, Michigan is on the final day. So we will get to be there for all of it. That's the plan. So hope you stay tuned with us till then. All right. Thanks. Have a great day. See ya.